Hello learners and viewers, welcome to this session. Today's topic is Understanding Gender Equality. This topic is part of the course MGS-002 and this is part of the program Masters in Gender and Development Studies. I have prepared this session with the following objectives. First, we will discuss what is meant gender equality, why gender equality is important for both the society and economics world over, and there are certain concepts related to gender equality. Let us learn about the concepts related to gender equality and approaches related to gender equality in this session. And after understanding the concepts and approaches related to gender equality, let us map gender equality at national and global level. Finally, what are the initiatives taken by the United Nations and the Government of India to promote gender equality? With this objective, this session was designed. And after listening this session, you all must be wondering what is the learning outcome of this session. Learning outcome is to discuss the need for gender equality and analyze how unequal women are. Already, we are not reached the gender equality. Why there is an inequality existing in the society, and through the data, we come to know that how unequal women are and explain what is gender equality and the ways to reduce the gender gap. Finally, describe the mechanism and initiatives instituted at global and national level to promote gender equality. We all know, all of us have undergone the COVID pandemic, and due to this COVID pandemic, after this COVID pandemic, there are various issues faced by the women. Specifically, there is an issue related to economy in the society. Even though we all know that women are the front line in managing COVID pandemic as essential workers, but even though they are managing the COVID pandemic, there are pre-existing gender gaps. Those pre-existing gender gaps has amplified, widened, and the crisis has been increased. And there is an asymmetrically differences between men and women. So during this lockdown, the hardest sector has hit down by the lockdown is that rapid digitalization. In the digitalization, specifically in the service economy, mostly the women were placed. They have highly affected. Most of them either they lost the job, and due to the care activities they themselves left the job and they became part of the care activities, and mostly they were confined into the private space. Combined with the additional pressures of providing care in the home, the crisis has halted the progress toward gender parity, both private and public domain of the life. This is the first thing. So how do we map the existing gender gap? We could all learn about the existing gender gap through the Global Gender Gap Report. Every year, there is a Global Gender Gap Report. As per 2001 report, 2001 report specifically measures equality in economic, education, health and political spheres in 156 countries, which includes India also. As per 2001 report, India ranks 140. Even India is much lagging behind our neighboring countries. If you look at the trends of gender gap existing in India, of course, India has made considerable progress to reduce gender gaps in education and health, but these gaps has been increased specifically in economics and political sphere. You all must be wondering, how can we understand the existing gender gap in the economic sphere? This economic sphere we could able to understand by calculating female labor force participation. As far as political sphere is concerned, we could able to understand the existing gender equality by looking at the women's representation at the various level. These are the main indicators to assess the existing gender gap in economic and political sphere. This is the one thing. If you look at the globally, the average distance completed to parity is at 68%. With regard to political sphere, as I have already mentioned, there is a largest gender gaps existing in the political sphere. Across 156 countries covered by the index, the women represent only 26.1% of some of 35,500 parliament seats and just 22.6% of over 3,400 ministries worldwide. So if you look at this data, one could able to understand the women's low representation, and even in 81 countries there has been no women representation, or they have never experienced the women as a head of the state. Looking at this list, we could able to understand that there is an existence of gender gap in political sphere. As a learner and as a viewer, you all must be wondering, why do we need to insist women's representation, or why do we need to talk about the increasing women's representation in political sphere? First of all, we need to understand that whether it's the parliament or state assemblies, that is the very significant political institutions where the decisions will be taken, and these are the law making institutions. These institutions will make very significant laws to run the countries. If there is less or no representation in this specific institutions, specifically parliament and state assemblies, we may not, or the institution itself may not bring gender sensitive or gender transformative public policies, laws and programs. If they are not able to bring gender transformative policies, programs and laws, it may not reflect the needs of the women and other marginalized communities. So increasing women's representation in significant political institution is very significant to reflect women's and other marginalized sections' needs and their aspirations. That is the significant objectives to increase women's representation. Next is that if you look at the globally on the economic participation and opportunity, gap is the result of two opposing trends. For example, if you look at the economic participation and if you look at the women's representation or girls' representation in schools and higher education, certainly we have increased the women's representation in the higher education. That can be assessed, and the existing data clearly pointed out that we have increased the girls' proportion in the schools and the higher education. But still, we need to go long way, and there are increasing number of skilled women proportional women's professionals, but it is in a very slow pace. Even if increase the women's education or the women's representation in higher education, as well as women's making women as a skilled professionals, still the women are lagging behind in taking employment opportunities. That is the one thing we need to understand. That. So another significant point is that there is an existence of overall income disparities. That also could be assessed. Women representing just only 27% of all managerial positions. Like we were talking about the increasing women's representation in parliament and other legislative bodies. Like that, even if we need to increase women's representation at the managerial position in public and private sector institutions and organizations. The managerial position is a very significant position to take a decision related to this particular organization. If the women are not part of the decision making level in any organization or institution, like country's representation, that particular organization may not reflect women's aspiration needs, and the organization may not be gender sensitive. That is the significant point we need to understand. That's why we need to increase women's representation at every level, irrespective of that organization or institution at the national or subnational or regional level or local level, it is important to increasing women's representation at various level in all institutions. Here we need to talk about the how to mainstream the gender issues across all levels. That is important. You all must be already read about what is gender mainstreaming, what is the need for mainstreaming gender at various levels. So when we read about gender mainstreaming, same points we have insisted that the need for increasing women's representation across all levels. Next important thing about existing gender gap is their health. In health survival, 96% of this gender gap has been closed. Thus, achieving gender equality is a challenge globally and nationally. But first, there is a need to understand the gender equality, followed global and Indian scenario on gender equality, and what are the strategies to promote gender equality. That is the important. If you look at this like this picture, then we could able to understand what it tries to talk about it. After looking at this picture, I will explain what is formal equality and what is substantive equality. Although, like for example, first let us go to the defining what is gender equality. Gender equality refers to the equal rights, responsibilities and opportunities to women, men, girls and boys. Equality does not mean that women and men will become the same. It means women's and men's rights, responsibilities and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born male or female, irrespective of whatever gender one has. Equality means it equal to all. So gender equality implies that the interest, needs and priorities of both men, women are taken into consideration, recognizing the diversity of different groups of women and men. So gender equality is not a women's issue, but should concern and fully engage men as well as women. That is the point. Here I was talking about, when I showed the picture, there is two types of equality. One is the formal equality, another one is substantive equality. When we talk about the formal equality, the concept of formal gender equality is premised on the principle of sameness of women, men and people on the gender continuum, and assumes that if a women, men and people on the gender continuum receive the same opportunity and are treated similarly, and equality will be achieved. This is the assumption. When we talk about the formal equality, we assume that we are giving both opportunities for men, women and other genders, assuming that with that opportunity, both men, women and other genders, they are equally benefit and equality will be achieved. But unlike formal equality, when you talk about the substantive gender equality, this concept recognizes that women, men have to be treated differently, and the disadvantages faced by the women begin with have to be addressed to achieve equality. The substantive equality approach also recognizes that gender interlocks with other identities. For example, women who belongs to urban areas may not be faced same kind of problem when you look at the women in the rural area. Same thing, like if women or girls, if they are disadvantage due to the economic activities or location or class concept or caste concept, these are all various social institutions interlocked with the gender equality that needs to be considered. Accordingly, we need to make enough policies and laws to address the gender equality. For example, if that particular girl, if she comes from a very disadvantaged position, and same thing, one girl has come from urban areas, we cannot treat both of them equally. If we treat both of them equally and if we provide opportunities for both the individual same, then the particular individual who has come from a disadvantaged position, for example, if that individual has come from a rural areas, that individual may not be able to utilize the existing opportunities and may not be able to grow fast like the other individual who has come from an advantaged position and who has come from an urban area. Same thing, we have to think about both male and female. If both male and female, if we consider both of them equal and if we give both of them in equal opportunities, due to the various existing factors like a patriarchy, caste, class and other factors may not provide same opportunities like a male members in the society, and they may not be able to utilize same opportunities and they may not able to grow. So considering these existing situations, we need to provide, considering existing differences in the society because of these sexual differences, we need to provide different opportunities for male and different opportunities for female, and we have to make laws according to the existing differences, and we need to improve and we need to bring gender equality. If you look at this picture, there is a fox and the crane. There are two small boxes. We have filled the water, we have given them. For example, if you provide the same opportunities, both male and female, like maybe fox, due to the disadvantaged position, it may not be able to drink the water. Same thing, crane, due to his advantaged position, due to his beak, he could able to drink the water. Same thing happen when you give the same opportunities for male and female. Due to the existing sexual differences, other existing differences and other patriarchy and due to various social institutions, how they treat male in a different way, how they treat female in a different way. So we need to consider all those existing differences. Accordingly, we have to make laws, policies to address the existing differences. Then only we can bring female on par with male members, then equality could be achieved. These things we need to, when we talk about the formal and substantive equality, this is the significant differences. Substantive equality approach entitles holding up group meetings at a time and place convenient to women farmers. When you talk about the formal equality, same example I could able to explain for both formal and substantive equality. For example, formal equality, when we talk about that, we are considering farming as a group. We are considering male and female farmers in the same manner. So when we conduct a meeting, maybe without considering the existing differences between male farmers and female farmers, we may conduct a meeting during the daytime. So female may be doing farming activities in his own farm or going as an agriculture laborer in some other farm. After coming back from farming activities, that female individual need to do certain household activities, and after completing all the care work, maybe that females may get time to attend the meetings in the late evenings. At the same time, if you look at the male farmers, maybe whenever we convene the meeting, they could able to attend the meeting. So substantive equality approach entitles holding a meetings at a time and place convenient to women farmers, strengthening childcare facilities in higher educational institutions, providing free sex realignment surgery in government health facilities, and posting gender sensitive teachers and health professionals. Also, when we talk about the substantive equality, it also entitles working with men, boys on substantive gender equality. So now, learners and listeners, you must be clearly understand what is gender equality. There are two types of gender equality. One is formal gender equality, other one is substantive gender equality. Now, let us see what are the international convention agreements related to gender equality. You all must be already read in the course material, and we have clearly mentioned about the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is the SIDA Convention. It happened in 1981. Second one is that Vienna Declaration and Program of Action 1983. Then Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995, Goal 5 of Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. These are some of the international conventions and goals specifically formulated to address the gender equality. As far as SIDA is concerned, SIDA clearly defines what constitutes discrimination against women, and it has set up an agenda for national action to end such discrimination. As far as Vienna Declaration and Program for Action mark the culmination of a long process of review and debate over the status of human rights machinery in the world. When we talk about the Beijing Platform for Action in 1995, it has flagged 12 key areas where urgent action was needed to ensure greater gender equality and opportunities for women, men, girls and boys. It has also, Beijing Platform for Action, it has also laid out concrete ways for countries to bring about change. Now, we are talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The SDG has listed 17 goals to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all by 2030. Specifically, SDG 5 relates to achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. And we can talk about more about the international agreements. After discussing international agreements, let us discuss about what are the efforts taken at the national level. As far as SIDA is Vienna Declaration, both are concerned, it is legally binding on the countries which have ratified it. India also ratified both SIDA as well as Vienna Declaration. So, India, we are legally binding countries, one of the legally binding countries. Next, related to Beijing Platform for Action and Sustainable Development Goals, it has no legally binding on the countries. For example, Beijing and SDG, related to SDG, there is no legal binding for the countries, but United Nations has given certain prescription as far as Beijing Platform for Action and SDG. Based on this United Nations advice, it is countries' own responsibility to implement, or like for example SDG. Based on SDG goals, it is the responsibility of the individual countries to make necessary laws and make necessary policies and programs to address various issues. So, for example, we were talking about the gender equality. Gender equality is part of the SDG goals. So, it is the responsibility of the, no legal binding for the countries, it is the responsibility of the countries to make necessary laws to address the gender equality. That is, as far as UN monitoring mechanism, this we need to understand that. For example, we were talking about the Vienna Declaration and SIDA Convention. Both are legally binding agreement. As far as legally binding agreement is concerned, the countries, they need to submit the report related to gender discrimination. As far as SIDA is concerned, the committee also receives shadow or alternative reports. The government will submit one report to the UN related to existing gender issues in a particular country. Apart from government report, UN agency, they also receive shadow or alternative reports from NGOs and compares the government reports with the NGO reports and other literature and gives them or provides certain concluding observations. Based on this UN observation, the particular country, they could able to improve or they able to make necessary laws, policies and programs address the gender equality. As far as Government of India is concerned, governments have to report on progress in implementing recommendation listed in the concluding observation, as I have mentioned. Through the similar process, implementation of Vienna Declaration 1993 is monitored by the United Nations Human Rights Council. While the governments do submit reports on Beijing Platform for Action and will have to do so for SDGs also, but the system of shadow report is not insisted as far as Beijing Platform for Action or SDG is concerned. This we need to understand. As far as Government of India's commitments to UN interventions, we can quickly go through that. The Indian government has prepared voluntary national reviews, latest by 2020, around sustainable development goals, covering SDG 5 also, because SDG 5 specifically talks about the gender equality. These voluntary national reports are supposed to report what is being done by the government to move towards SDG 5 and assess the progress on women's economic equality and economic empowerment, also suggest the recommendation. It also prepares the report on progress in implementing the goals of the SIDA committee and the Beijing Platform for Action. Like, we need to see what are the Government of India's responses. The government recognizes some of the barriers to gender equality in India, such as low or declining female labor force participation. In the beginning itself, we were talking about the low women's labor force participation and low ownership of agricultural land. But all of them, we could not able to address it. That voluntary national review 2020 submitted by the Indian government to United Nations indicates that the government is looking at incremental change rather than transformative one. That we need to address that. What are the efforts at national levels? Like, there are various efforts taken by the government. One is that initially the Government of India has approached welfare report. Approach by addressing the various issues of women and marginalized sections, and it has also 1974 the government has prepared the report. The title is Towards Equality, drafted by the Committee on the Status of Women in India, and it was talking about the women's existing status. According to that report, the government could able to make necessary policies and programs. Dear listeners and learners, you could able to understand what is gender equality and two types of gender equality, as well as their efforts at the national as well as international level to bring gender equality at various levels. Specifically, today we have discussed about the significance of bringing gender equality political and economic level. Thank you so much for listening this session.